Happy birthday, Roger Goodell. He turned 60 today, but a more significant birthday for our purposes, number 22 of the Minnesota Vikings, not Harrison Smith, Paul Krause, Hall of Famer, who turned 77 today, and he is still, even though he last played 40 years ago, he is the all-time interception leader in NFL history with 81. He passed Emlen Tunnell late in his career with 79. The next closest guy is Rod Woodson with 71. The active leader right now in the NFL is Reggie Nelson with 38. He's tied for 91st with 38. Isn't it amazing that in this day and age, with all the passing that's done, there are fewer interceptions than there used to be?
Yeah.
How do we reconcile that?
Well, there's more ways to get cheap completions. You know, of course, the rules are favored for the offense more. And, you know, there's offenses and quarterbacks are better now than they were then. And it was a different type of game. Like, I always go back to something my dad used to say, or Bill Parcells used to tell my dad in the mid-'80s. He would always want him to be aggressive, push the ball down the field. He would tell my father, if you don't throw an interception, you're not being aggressive enough in this football game. So I think there was a different mindset that way. But it is kind of fascinating that we do throw the ball more now. There's more yards and less interceptions. It just speaks to what the game is. But I didn't realize this guy was that tall. That was the one thing that jumped out to me when I watched highlights of him last night a little bit. Do you vividly remember watching him in your younger years with the Vikings?
Yes, thank you for sticking the knife into my side over that. I vividly recall that Paul Krause failed to help Nate Wright over the top at the end of a certain playoff game in 1975 when Drew Pearson pushed off of Nate Wright, and Paul Krause got there way too late to keep Drew Pearson from catching the game-winning touchdown pass from Roger Staubach that coined the term Hail Mary. Yes,
so
I do have vivid recollection of that.
Here we are in a segment. We're trying to say something good about the guy, and you got to bring the whole segment down about the one play he didn't do something in his career. Then why the hell did you buy his jersey then? You got his jersey, and you said you were going to wear it today. Where the hell is it?
But I bought his jersey because I am a glutton for punishment, and I always want to remember that pain from late December of 1975 when he could have had interception number 82, although it wouldn't have counted because it was in the postseason. I digress. Yes, I did. I couldn't find his jersey. I don't know where it is. I didn't burn it, though, like people are doing with Antonio Brown's jersey. I still have it somewhere.
Okay, good. Yeah, so, there it is. So you lost that jersey already? I mean, are you kidding me?
I don't know where it is. It's in the house somewhere.
Okay.
It's a big house. I lose things all the time. All right. Let's pivot now to why we brought this up, because his record is one that I don't think is going to be broken anytime soon. Definitely not in my lifetime, which hopefully will extend a few more years. But what are the records in the NFL that come to mind for you that we can just assume will never be broken? Give me one.
Well, I look at the Emmitt Smith all-time rushing leader, and that's one that certainly pops out to me. And, of course, it's a popular one. But, I just think with this day and age, the game is as physical as it is. I have a hard time believing that a running back can last long enough to eclipse that mark about Emmitt Smith. I mean, that's the great thing about Emmitt Smith. Yeah, I mean, I would call Emmitt Smith one of the 2 or 3 greatest running backs of all time, but he's certainly up there in the rankings. Had a great offensive line, but I think one of the best things about him was his durability and his ability to be consistent year after year after year, even when, some of the physical skills did go downhill. So that's one for sure I look at in the modern day NFL and go, man, that is going to be tough to top. 18,355 yards.
Yeah, and because we are past that era of every team having a workhorse running back who gets the ball 25 to 30 times a game, teams like to have 2 or 3 tailbacks that distribute the reps for a variety of reasons, one of which is business. Because if you have one guy who becomes that workhorse and is scoring all those touchdowns and generating those yards, you got to pay him a ton of money. If you have 2 or 3, you can manage your cap more effectively, and you can make the argument that there are plenty of guys out there who can do what one guy would otherwise do. But you're right about the durability of Emmitt Smith. That was his biggest skill. And we've talked about the 1993 game, Week 17, against your dad's Giants with he had the busted shoulder, and he kept going, and the 1 seed was on the line, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. So it is amazing what Emmitt Smith did. And in that same vein, I know Adrian Peterson got close to the Eric Dickerson single-season rushing record 7 years ago. I don't see that 21-05. It's just the game has changed, and as we see more and more passing, there are going to be fewer and fewer big rushing performances, fewer and fewer workhorse tailbacks. That 21-05 is, I think, Emmitt's is going to be harder to beat, but I still think 21-05 is something that's going to stand for a long time as well.
Well, yeah, that is. That's a phenomenal feat with Eric Dickerson there. I mean, just to get to 2,000 is hard enough. And, yeah, I mean, it is hard to think that a team would be, running the ball consistently this day and age to get their running back 2,100 yards. What about the Brett Favre one, 297 straight starts? Do you think that goes by the wayside anytime soon? Like, there's a part of me that thinks, yes, it'll only be a matter of time because of the way the rules are protecting the quarterback, that we will have somebody within the next 10 to 15 years break that, even though that's a truly remarkable feat in itself as well.
That's a great point. The other side of that is we're so sensitive now to injuries, health, concussions. There were probably more than a few games along that path that Brett Favre would have been ruled out for a concussion if the NFL had been as sensitive for the bulk of his career. I mean, his last year was 2010. The NFL had its concussion epiphany in 2009. So I don't know that you can pull it off from that perspective, but as the game protects quarterbacks more and more, there's less of an opportunity to have those concussions. So maybe someone can pull it off. And it would have to be a guy who is very good about avoiding contact. We obsess over that all the time for good reason. The more hits you take, the more likely you are to get injured. But Favre took the hits. He just was able to keep going. And remember, he had the painkiller addiction. He couldn't use painkillers, and he still found a way to keep playing week after week after week after week.
Yeah, I know. That's what's amazing. I mean, he played in some of the old school era football, too, to where he stayed healthy through that time period, which is amazing, too. I mean, Brett Favre is special. We know that. Here's another one that I thought, like the single-season touchdown record, right? LaDainian Tomlinson, he had 31 back in 2006. That's one I look at and go, back to the running back conversation where there is a running back by committee now in the NFL by the most part, and we don't wear the running back into the ground like we used to in the early 2000s and 90s. 31 touchdowns in a single season, the closest we've had in modern football, just here recently, Gurley with 21 this year is really as close as it's gotten, because we've gotten away from the Priest Holmes, Sean Alexander, John Riggins, Terrell Davis type of runner where they give him the ball, like you said, 25 times a game. That's another one I look at that I don't think is going to fall by the wayside anytime soon.
Yeah. And the bottom line is those guys end up costing a ton of money. Remember when Sean Alexander finally got his big contract from the Seahawks after he was the MVP in 2005, they were done with him after only one season of that big contract. You have to have multiple running backs if you want to avoid creating this guy that everyone loves, that scores all the touchdowns, that's on everyone's fantasy team, and then you've got to pay him huge money, and teams realize that it's better to have multiple. And who's going to get 31 touchdowns then? It's not going to be a receiver, because the quarterback isn't going to force the ball to one guy all the time, and there isn't a guy out there. I mean, what's the record for touchdown receptions for a receiver stats? 23?
It's
23, Randy Moss.
Yeah, right.
Randy Moss in 2007.
Which was, you want to talk about another amazing feat. He got that in 2007 to tie Jerry Rice, right? Who did it in 1987 in a short season because of the strike. That's another one that I look at and just go, I mean, as far as touchdowns per game, and I know we're getting off a little bit of all-time records, but for him to have 23 touchdowns, Jerry Rice, in 1987, which was a strike-shortened season, is truly one of the greatest individual single-season feats in the history of football. I mean, that to me blows me away, because I remember the Randy Moss 2007 season, and it felt like he was catching multiple touchdown passes every week. I can't imagine Jerry Rice in 87 with less games. I mean, he was on fire. That just speaks to his greatness as well.
22 touchdown receptions in only 12 games year for Jerry Rice because of the strike. I got one more.
Yeah.
And this dovetails with Paul Krause and his 81 career interceptions. A guy named, let me make sure I get his name right, I don't want to defame anyone, Jim Hardy, back in 1950, threw 8 interceptions in one game. 8 interceptions. He had 3 in the first half, and he said after the game, I felt really low at halftime. I can remember sitting on a bench in the locker room with my head in my hands, thinking that nothing could be worse than throwing 3 interceptions in one half.
Except
he had
for
5 in the
the
second
next half. That is great.
That never will be beat because you're going to get yanked. You're gone. You're on the bench. You're not going to have a chance to throw eight interceptions in today's NFL.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.